All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today we're going to be talking about Episode 4 of The Bad Batch, A Different Approach. This probably won't be a very long episode, I don't have too much to say, but I do enjoy that this episode kind of avoided the typical tropes we would see from an earlier season Bad Batch episode. I expected that after Omega and Crosshair escaped Mount Tantus with a broken down ship that they would crash land and we would fight some random monster, and that would be the episode this week. But they took a different direction, a different approach. See what I did there? And so we got a fun little team up with Omega and Crosshair, and a very surprising emotional payoff at the end of this episode that I'm excited to get into. So Omega and Crosshair crash on this remote world, and they have to go to the local town and try and scrounge up 30,000 credits to bribe the shipmaster to get them off-world, because they are fugitives of the Empire, and I'm very surprised that 30,000 credits was an obtainable amount of money in this kind of run-down city. I expected it to be a lot lower of a bribe, but I guess this local cantina, you play with big money, because Omega and Crosshair go in, and we have this kind of gambling scene where Omega shows that she has this tenacity and optimism, like, no, we can get the money. Don't worry, we won't have to use blasters or anything like that. And she gets snappy with Crosshair. I kind of like their banter. Again, I wish there was more emotional catharsis between them, but we might be getting that next week. So Omega starts to take money from all these lowlifes on this remote world, and then an Imperial officer walks in. And I actually really enjoyed his character. I thought he was a nice villain of the week. I thought he was charming, but also intimidating in the way he was very calm and collected. I like how he played against her, and he bet his money, and he lost, and he's like, no, you beat me. Fair play, fair play. But then we see him flip back to the Imperial side, and he's like, oh, well, gambling is illegal, so I'm going to have to fine you. And I actually thought he was going to fine her for the entire amount that she won, but he only did 10 grand. So this guy, not too bad, to be honest, for an Imperial. So I really liked him as a villain for this week. Unfortunately, he meets a very, very terrible ending, which, to be honest, I think other villains have deserved more than him. I mean, this guy was just trying to, find some people, and he gets eaten by like a Rathtar, which is pretty insane. Some quick small details that I want to talk about in this episode, because again, I don't think there's too much to really dig into here, but I do want to talk about Crosshair and his kind of shaky hand that he's been dealing with. We saw it alluded to in the past couple episodes, but we see in the middle of a firefight, it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment, but he's firing shots at the troopers and he misses. Crosshair never misses a shot, and he misses his first volley, and then he sits behind the control console and he shakes his hand. And it's something that we've seen come up now a couple times this season, and I really think they are setting up for a very critical moment where he has to either take the shot and miss, or just something will go wrong because he isn't able to hit a shot. And I'm excited to see where this payoff is going to go. But I really like this little small detail here. Another thing Omega mentions is that she wants to go back to Mount Tantus and free all of the clones and Emery, her sister, and probably also Nala Se from the facility. And I think thematically, from the story arc that we saw in Clone Wars of these clones essentially being bred to be killed, and not just be killed, but also be scapegoated for the murder of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire, when most of the galaxy doesn't know that it was not their choice. They had these inhibitor chips. So this would be a really great payoff if, in the end, Omega is able to liberate all these clones that were going to be cast aside and were going to be made prisoners and test subjects. So I think that's a really full circle moment. I think it would be great to have this moment with Emery, and Emery's so locked into this mindset that you can't survive out in the world, that, her life is comfortable where she is, being this pseudo prisoner to the Empire and being this scientist, but Omega needs to show her the outside world, as the Bad Batch showed her when she was younger, a couple of years ago at the beginning of Bad Batch. So whether the Mount Tantus liberation will be the mid-season or the finale of the entire series, we'll have to see. I know they've released the episode titles, and I know some of them are maybe a little bit more revealing than others, but I don't like to look at those until the week of, because I don't really want to know where the season's going, if that makes sense. But this show is either ending with a lot of dead clones and a couple still alive that live on Pabu and live on the legacy of the clones, or it's going to be a happy ending and a lot of clones get out and they free Mount Tantus and Hemlock dies and all this other stuff. One final detail I want to talk about that is totally not serious, and it's not even a nitpick, it's just a really funny observation before I get into the emotional finale. I love when fully armored troopers with helmets wear capes or the ponchos, or they wear visors over their visors of their helmet. It's so funny because I absolutely love it. It's so cool. I love when they do it in the original Clone Wars by Gendy, where you see the clone troopers in the mud and they have the ponchos and the hoods on. Like, that's so cool, but it's so not functional because you literally have armor on already. What is the poncho gonna do? And the visors over the lenses of their helmets, now you just have two visors to clean. I mean, I get it. It might be like horse racing where you have the multiple goggles and when one gets muddy, you just pull it up because you're in the middle of a horse race. And maybe these stormtroopers, when it's super windy or super muddy, they just pull up the goggles and then their lenses for their helmet are still clean and clear. But I'm going way too deep into this, I know, but I'm just saying from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks so cool. From a functionality standpoint, makes completely zero sense. Like the snowtroopers on Hoth, those were perfect because it combined both. It was functional and aesthetic. These and the clone troopers that I talk about with the hoods on, it's just there to look cool. And you know what? I'm fine with that. So anyway, the last couple moments of this episode, Omega and Crosshair, they get away. They use Crosshair's method where they, blast their way out. They release the zoo to take care of the Empire. And Omega sends out a signal. And it's to Hunter and Wrecker, and it's to meet them in a remote world somewhere. And Crosshair's very, again, not trustworthy, not believing that they'll show up. Omega's like, no, they'll show up. And we show up on the moon that we saw back in season 1, I believe, during the Ryloth arc. I believe this is the same moon where Omega and Hera go. I think so, which I really liked. That was one of my favorite parts of season 1. So I thought that was a nice full circle moment. If it's not, all of that was for nothing. But we see that they are there. And again, there's a part of me like, oh, is this a trick? It's like, is this really them? And it's definitely them. And I think this was a great scene. Like it did hit me more emotionally than I expected it to. I give a lot of credit to Kevin Kiner's score for that. Again, he's doing a beautiful job with the Bad Batch score. As I said in my last week's episode, I think this is his best score overall for a series when it comes to atmosphere and fitting the aesthetic of the show for Bad Batch. But, the way they animated Omega's tears and the way they just left, silence and the moment breathe, it was just really well done. And when she saw Hunter and she ran to him, like, I was like, okay, I actually, I feel something. I didn't think I would feel anything, but they did a great job. And then we end the episode with the nice tension between the old Bad Batch crew and Crosshair, where they're looking at him like they're about to fight. And he's looking at them like, yeah, I know you hate me, but... So I just like how they did this final moment here. There is a part of me that thinks that this moment and reunion is too quick. I know it's not as egregious as the Grogu and Mando reunion in the Book of Boba Fett after the season 2 finale, but I just don't know if they did a good enough time of conveying how much time has passed, except telling us that a lot of time has passed. You know what I mean? Like Hunter and Wrecker just essentially say, oh, we've been searching across the galaxy an entirety of 4 times, and then Hunter's like, no, it's been 5 times. And we have Omega's hair's a bit longer, and we have the tick marks on her prison cell at Mount Tantus. Like, there's a lot of times where we're told that time has passed, but I just didn't feel like we've been apart from each other long enough for this moment to maybe hit a bit harder. I know it probably worked for a lot of people, but in the grand scheme of things, it's only been 4 episodes where they've been apart from each other, and the first 3 episodes all released in one pack, so you watched them just sequentially last week. So it doesn't feel like we've been apart from each other for that long, just because we've literally only sat down for 2 weeks and they're already back together. So this part definitely might have worked for some. It didn't work as much for me. I don't know how they could have maybe done it differently, because I think the Hunter and Wrecker episodes, when it's just them, it's not that entertaining. And of course, I always complain about them doing too many Monster of the Week episodes or one-off adventures. So if they did too many of those, I would have been upset with just Hunter and Wrecker. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but I just think there might have been a better way to show the passage of time between the two groups instead of just saying, hey, it's been a long time. But that's all I got for this week's episode of The Bad Batch. Fun little adventure, still moved the story forward, tried some new ideas, which I appreciated, and had a nice, surprising, emotional payoff at the end. So follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. We could talk some Star Wars on there. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on whatever streaming service you're listening on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you know that likes Star Wars to come on down and listen to this very casual but also very deeply analytical podcast we call Star Wars Mark of Balance. But as always, thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.